Before watching this video, make sure that you have a prior knowledge about the basic topics for C# programming. But if you don't have, don't worry. I got you covered. I have several sets of videos about the fundamental topics on C#. I have provided the links of this video just below the comment section. So let's talk about Windows Forms. Windows Forms is a graphical user interface for building Windows desktop applications. This is part of the .NET framework provided by the Visual Studio. It supports drag and drop placement of visual controls that makes it easy to build desktop applications. It can access the local hardware and the file system of your computer, such as those music, videos, document files, and other computer files. With Windows Forms, you can place different visual controls. For example, button. Another one is a text box. You can also add controls such as checkboxes, label, radio buttons, and combo box. And there are lots more that is available in Visual Studio. So let's now move to the Visual Studio and write some simple Windows Form application. Okay, so I have already opened up my Visual Studio. So to create a new Windows Form project, let's move to the File menu, select New Project, and then from the available programming languages at the left side of your New Project dialog, select the Visual C#, and then from the template on the middle of your New Project dialog, you choose the Windows Form app. Let's name this WinForms. Then let's click OK. Okay, so now we have already our form. So by default, the Visual Studio will create automatically a form in our designer. Okay, so this is the form designer. These are the controls that we can place inside of our form. And this is the Solution Explorer that provides the hierarchical structure of our project. So this is our project, WinForms, and the properties of our project, references of the project, and the form file of our form control. Okay, so to start with this, let's start working on some basic properties of our form. There are some important properties of a form control that we need to modify, and we can check that properties from the properties window. So right click on your form and then just click the properties, and it will show us the property window of the form. At the top, you have here the form 1 because basically at this point in time, the selected object is the form control. So it shows that we have currently selected the form 1. And this property shows all the properties of our form. Since we are selecting the form, it shows the properties of the form. It starts with the name and then down to W, window states. So remember that these properties are arranged alphabetically from A down to Z. But basically, the name, since it's the most important property of all the properties of our form, is the name. So that is why it is placed at the topmost of the list of our properties. So let's change the name to FRM main form or just FRM main. So this will become useful to us later as we write our codes inside of our forms. But for now, let's make it a habit that whenever we create new objects or new controls, we have to assign a unique name for each control. Okay, so we have now FRM main, and then let's try running this application by hitting the start button. All right, so this is the result of our form. So this is how our form looks like in the runtime environment. Okay, so let's stop the application and let's try changing the caption of our form. Move to the property with the name text. Okay, by default, the value of this is form 1. So let's change this to main form. Okay, and after changing it, you'll notice that the caption from our title bar also changed. So let's run this again. And now we have a very nice text in our title bar, main form. Okay, so by default, our form is resizable. And at the same time, it can be maximized, restore, and minimized. Okay, so let's say we want to have a fixed form so that we will be able to maintain a good layout of our form controls. How can we do that? Okay, so let's move to the properties again. Let's start the application and then select the form and then go to the properties and let's look for the form border style. By default, that is set to be sizable and we want it to be fixed. So let's change this to fixed single. Okay, so having fixed single as the value for our form border style, this will disallow our user to resize the form. So it will no longer display a double-headed arrow showing that it can be resized. Then the next thing is we have to remove the minimize and maximize button. Okay, so let's turn off the application by clicking the stop button. And then let's move to the minimize and maximize button. So letter M, maximize. So by default, it is set to true. If I'm going to set this to false, observe that the maximize button will disappear. Okay, so something happened to our maximize button as if it was set to disabled. And then let's do the same for the minimize. Set this to false. There you have it. So the maximize and minimize button are now hidden. When running the application, it will no longer provide the maximize and minimize button. So the user has no way for changing the size of our form. And the good thing about this is that we can maintain a good layout for our visual controls. All right. Another thing that is very important for Windows Form is that you have to set the start up or the start position. So the default value for this is the default location, but that is not an advisable one if you want it to be consistent every time you open your Windows application. So the best value for this is the center screen, so that whenever we open our application, it will display at the center of our screen. Okay, so let's start this again. Okay, there you go. So every time we open our application, it will always display at the middle or at the center of our screen. Okay, so let's summarize everything. So we created a Windows form. Then after that, we changed some properties of it. So by doing right click on the form and then select the properties to display the properties window. And then from here, we change the name of our form to FR main. And then we also change the form border style to fixed single, so to disallow our user from resizing the form so that it will not harm or it will not change the layout of our visual controls if in case that we have some visual controls inside of our form. And then we also change the maximize and minimize to false because we want to hide the button for maximize and minimize from our user, which can also affect the layout of our visual controls if in case that we have already these controls inside of our form. And the last one is the start position. So from Windows default location, we change it into center screen because we want it to be always at the center of our screen whenever we open our Windows form. And then we also change the title of our form, the one that appears at the title bar of our form. We change it to main form. Okay, so those are the important properties of our form. So the text, start position, minimize, maximize, form border style, and again, the most important property is the name property. Okay, So that wraps up our discussion about Windows Forms. In the next video, we will discuss form events.